bad values.
Right.
And so the reason that I think culture has gotten deranged is there have been a few really key pieces, the pill being one of them, the sexual revolution being another, where we changed morals and it had an immediate positive effect, freedom, which I really believe in. But then it has these second and third order consequences that unfortunately we had to let a couple of generations get mauled in this machinery. But there's now an awakening, and this is how I think it has to play out. You have to let people do dumb things, and then other people learn from the dumb things. Keep the good, discard the bad. And then now we're going to swing back in a more traditional direction. And history tells me it will just keep pendulum swinging back and forth.
How do you define freedom? How do you define freedom?
The ability to choose what you want to do.
For me, that just sounds a bit like freedom means the ability to give into your impulses.
Correct.
But from giving into your impulses means that you're a slave to your impulses,
but
not
you
free.
Just pull the fast one. So I am free to give into my impulses, but I don't.
You choose not to, yeah.
Correct.
You
So
exercise self-control.
And the reason this is important, when I was at Quest, we had made what, I'll just be bold and say, was a revolutionary new piece of food.
Yes.
All the while the government was threatening to make us put a warning label on our food because it was too high in fat. But fat wasn't the problem. They would have no problem with me putting sugar in it, which we didn't, but they would have loved that. No problem, green light everywhere. But they were threatening to create this new label that would have made us put a red light on our product because it was high in fat. But they're dumb. They didn't know what they were talking about. And I am so afraid of well-intentioned, but unfortunately undereducated people doing these top-down solutions. So I want to be able to decide whether or not I chase a bunch of different women or whether I go, I don't think that's going to lead me where I want to go, but I get to make my own decision.
I would love to redefine freedom as the ability to overcome your own impulses for your long-term goals. And I know that doesn't sound very freeing, but I would say that it's far more freedom when I know I can avoid giving into the desire for cake or desire for this. I would feel like if I'm giving into everything I want to do, I'm a slave to my impulses and it feels like I'm a prisoner to my own desires. I would say freedom has to remove desires and replace it with goals. And I mean, it's not really the definition of freedom, but I genuinely think that's far more constructive to human flourishing than actual freedom, because we just describe freedom in this day and age as a low impulse control and giving into desires, which is actually not so much freedom but self-indulgence. Why can't we replace freedom with the ability to overcome desires? And that's where we're not giving into this, and that's, you almost see your desires as a tyrannical government telling you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't, or do this, do that. And we see our impulses as that, like a dictator in our brain that lives in our brain, designed to self-sabotage us. And our freedom comes from, no, fuck you, I'm not going to eat that piece of cake, or fuck you, I'm not going to pay for that escort, or no, I'm not. And it's going above the dictatorship impulses that we have in our thoughts.
That is so brilliant.
Aww.
Do you know Jocko Willink?
No.
So, oh my God. So it is amazing that you and Jocko have come to the same conclusion.
Oh, really?
I think you're both right.
What does Jocko do for a
So
living?
he's a military leader, beyond extraordinary person, has since left the military, was a Navy SEAL, left the military, started several companies teaching leadership. But he has a phrase, discipline equals freedom.
Right.
And so I think he would have stood up and clapped at your description of the tyrannical desires.
I would love to meet him at some point. He's
you
good.
two sitting down and talking would be fascinating. I want him to run for president. I am one of many people that would like him to run for president.
He's been on the show recently or a long time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, amazing. I'll make sure I watch it.
He's not going to, much to my dismay. But yes, so I agree with you. Discipline equals freedom. This is why. But you and I have I don't think it makes sense for us to spend more time on this, but you and I have a difference of opinion about whether people should be free to do dumb things. But we both agree that in practice, if you don't have discipline, you don't have real world
And I agree
freedom.
with your concept that it's almost good, allow people to make the mistakes, allow people to make moronic decisions. At least we get to see what those play out as. So I understand your perspective on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a value system gone awry.
Yes.
Is my takeaway.
Yeah.
That we believed so fervently in liberty that we thought liberty would have no consequences. So creating the pill, saying that women can and should be able to sleep around as much as they want, that a woman should be able to have any career that she wants, that they don't need to have kids, all of it. They should have the ability to choose that.
Yeah.
But there's a reason that Lisa and I say, hey, we've decided not to have kids.
Yeah.
P.S. This is a hyper dangerous strategy.
Yeah.
You should be very careful. Now, why do we say that? Because there are evolutionary algorithms running in your mind. The point is human flourishing. And we know that while this works for us, it's probably not going to work for everybody.
Do you know what? I have also changed my mind a lot on like children for men as well. I would say to men, if you naturally have a low sex drive, have children. If you've got a hyper sex drive, do not have children. You'll end up causing a lot of mistakes in your marriage. And I know that sounds terrible, but
Why does that sound terrible?
because what I've noticed is men who have a really high sex drive, they then have a woman and they're very happy, and then they have kids. Women, they change, their sex drive changes. So they become incapable of being monogamous in that situation, because obviously there's months or weeks and months without having sex. And more so than anything, the attention shifts to the child. So I think men should pay attention to whether or not they as a man can cope with long periods of celibacy. If you cannot, then don't think twice before just jumping in and having kids. Know yourself enough to know what is going to trigger your polygamy. And if you know that there's something that might trigger your polygamy, don't enter a monogamous relationship.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
And so many of them get jealous with the amount of attention that a woman gives their children, and so many of them then start seeking a feeling of being loved and adored that they used to get from their wife. So look, here's what I always say to women that come to me and say, how do you find a loyal man? I say, look, there's two types of men. There are some men that are loyal to their wife, regardless. Throughout their marriage, they'll be loyal to their wife. There are other men who are loyal to the woman they fell in love with. If she stays exactly like that woman, they will be loyal, and my husband falls into this category, they will be loyal to her forever. So as long as she doesn't change anything, she still looks after herself, she still gives him a lot of attention, she's still, available, all of those things, she's still affectionate, they will be loyal to that woman until they die. There's other men that will be loyal to their wife, so she can gain weight, she can lose weight, she can have kids, she can not have kids, she can be, have ups and downs, but they're loyal to that wife, they won't step out. You have to figure out which one of those your man is. If he's loyal to the woman that he... Are you a successful man who has achieved endless heights in his career? Are you somebody who's absolutely made it in his professional life, but his personal life just doesn't seem to match up? Are you somebody who goes through intense highs in business, but intense lows in your personal relationships? You might be somebody who has been blocking out relationships or entering relationships where you don't feel appreciated, or it's lacking the sexual or emotional intimacy that you require. If this sounds like you, then I have a program specifically catered to your needs. I've been helping high-end clients for a really long time, and I am able to identify the exact problems, the exact causes, and the exact solutions. So if this sounds like you, then please feel free to register below your details, so she can gain weight, she can lose weight, she can have kids, she can not have kids, she can be, have ups and downs, but they're loyal to that wife, they won't step out. You have to figure out which one of those your man is. If he's loyal to the woman that he fell in love with, you better stay exactly the same. If he's loyal to his wife, you can do whatever, he will be loyal. Do you think that's true?
Well, you certainly described me. I am loyal to Lisa. And so I have a whole thing in my psychology about I want to know what it looks like to share a life. And so I married a woman who stayed at home, who took care of my needs, who was going to have kids. And she ended up turning into an entrepreneur and all of that. Now, what's interesting is that it's so funny when people watch the episode that I did recently with Lisa, they're like, oh, she wears the pants in the family, and oh, Tom's beta. It's like, bitch, if you watch the whole episode, you are going to realize very quickly that isn't true.
No.
That I have a really strong belief that my job is to uplift her and to help her become the best version of herself and who she wants to be. But that in no uncertain terms, and Lisa will be the first to tell you this, that my role is to be the emotionally stable one, to be the rock, to, if she's getting out of pocket, quite frankly, emotionally, I'm there to nudge her back in and bring her back in line, which is something that I've heard you talk a lot about.
They define beta so like childlike. If you just have a strong woman and you support her, like, oh, you're beta. Beta is simply a case that you have a wife that absolutely adores you and loves you. You can't really be beta when you have a woman like that who is so unbelievably loyal, so dedicated to you, because whatever you've done has created that outcome in her. So you're by design alpha. Whereas beta, what I would say is when you have, in a relationship sense, is when you have a woman who's disrespectful, disloyal, is not madly in love with you, and instead of leaving, you reward that behavior. That is beta. But if you've got a very loving, loyal wife, which you, praise be to God, do have, it's impossibility for you to be a beta, because of how did you manage to get this connection out of her? How did you get this dedication out of her? How did you get this loyalty out of her? So the dynamic can't be beta, in my opinion.
Yeah, I haven't looked closely enough at the problem to know if a woman can really fall and commit to a beta male. There are relationships in my circle, people that I know but not well, where they very much fit the description of he really is beta and she really is alpha. I'm not inside their house. I don't know if it's
But is she dedicated and loyal to him?
It seems to be from the outside.
Then
but
it's limited in how beta. It might be just a case of he's a people pleaser and he's sensitive. But I really think beta is more of a case of rewarding disloyalty, rewarding promiscuity, or begging
that
for attention.
That for sure is a simp.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, so I would
No
say
doubt.
that's more what I lean into when I define beta. If your wife is loving and loyal to you, I don't care how you got that out of her, you got that out of her, so therefore your relationship is relatively good. But if she is disrespectful and disloyal, doesn't matter if you then stamp your authority and you've got muscles, you're still not alpha. You cannot be alpha. It's an impossibility. So I would just say that the level of loyalty that you've derived out of your wife would make it difficult for me to believe it's beta.
Yeah, no, I very much agree that, God, would I go into the alpha beta? At least I used to talk in these terms
I
for
don't
a long
really talk
time.
into these terms.
And
I also hate the high value, low value kind of.
Well, that got spoiled, didn't it? So I don't know why I'm hesitant. I don't like the terms alpha and beta, but I will say, here's what I think is a mature dynamic.
Yeah.
There are things that I'm better at than my wife. In those moments, I should lead. There are things that my wife is better at than I am. In those times, she should lead. When you balance it all out, my wife will tell you that I'm the right person to lead most of the time.
Yeah.
And so if you say, Lisa, who's the leader in the family? She'll say, it's my husband for sure, 100%. But I was a fool in the early days when I thought I had to lead all the time, and she would only respect me if I was like alpha dominant.
Yeah.
And so there is a lack of maturity in that.
Yeah. Well, good leadership is knowing when to delegate.
Correct.
And therefore, you have a wife that you can delegate things to. If you've chosen a wife that you can't delegate anything to, and you just have to lead everything, you haven't got a wife, you've got a child. And that's not very good leadership. That's just poor delegation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, so going back, okay, this is a breakdown of values. It's a breakdown of a vision of what the future really should look like, I think, because I think that men now are in some ways getting confused about what they want. Do I want a partner or do I want a sex toy? And if you want...
Hi guys, welcome back to my Patreon, where every single week you can tune in and get exclusive content. Not only that, but you can also message me anytime and receive a response within 20
Okay, this is a breakdown of values. It's a breakdown of a vision of what the future really should look like, I think, because I think that men now are in some ways getting confused about what they want. Do I want a partner or do I want a sex toy? And if you want a sex toy, fine, but there are trade-offs. You are going to give up a meaningful part of the human experience. If you want a wife and you are letting women trample all over you, you're going to end up being the child in the relationship. And so people really have to understand, like, one thing that happened to me, and we talked briefly in our last episode about this, but the girl that I was dating right before Lisa started to pull away. And I really am, I just live by a paradigm of things that I believe to be true. And one of the things that I believe to be true was, if somebody pulls away from you, the only wise response is to reciprocate and pull away from them. And so she pulled away from me, I pulled away from her, and then that brought her closer to me. And I was like, I can't believe this works. And so I was like, okay, that's hysterical, but fine, got it. I was also told that you need to be an asshole if you want to get laid. It's not that, it's confidence. But so literally, I'm not joking. Let's say I learned that at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday night. By 5 p.m. on Thursday, I was able to get laid. It was hysterical.
It makes that much of a difference, yeah.
From one day to the next, because you actually now have the unlock. Oh, I get it. I can't have fear of loss.
Yeah.
And once I was like, oh, I can't have fear of loss. Like, I just have to be like, this is who I am. If you're interested, great. And if not, then you'll walk away. And so I literally tried it as an experiment. I'm not kidding.
Instant.
Yes.
Instant.
And so I was like, this is hysterical. So this is what I talk about predictive validity. When you have figured out the thing that is true, then it will meet the real world and it will actually work. So anyway, people just need to understand what their goal is, what they're trying to achieve, and then build a rule set that's actually going to get them there. But they also need to know what their values are.
Yeah.
Values are tied to how you believe the world ought to be, and so that you'll respect yourself when you're by yourself.
But here's what I would say to people: your values are not what you think, it's what you do. So many people will think my values are I want somebody traditional, I've got values I want a successful man, or whatever it is. But what do you do in your real world? Who do you actually connect with? Who do you actually reward? Don't base your values on what you think is going on. What do you actually do? Now, if your values are that you reward men who pull away from you, you're always chasing after men, or you're always going for the guy that's super attractive and got lots of girls but then doesn't give you attention, you have to be honest with yourself. Is what do I actually value? Well, I don't value commitment and responsibility from men. I'm actually valuing this. Where people get wrong is they edit their values mentally but not actually in terms of behavior. So mentally they'll say they've got all these great values. If you speak to everybody, they'll say I want this, that and the other, and they say it well. But try and derive your values as almost do an inventory of your actual behaviors and who you've been rewarding in your past, who have you fallen in love with, what are your patterns, who have you rejected, and that shows you what your values actually are, not what you think they are. Don't airbrush your values just to sound like you're looking for someone great. Who are you actually rewarding? And if you do an inventory of your past relationships and you realize that I've always said no to guys that are actually very kind. I've always been very attached to men that are toxic and, unavailable. I kind of always attached to men who are following a bunch of bikini girls online. And so your values are a bit like they're not consistent. That your values are you're looking for somebody who deprives you of the commitment and connection. Now that you know your value, you can either change it or accept it. But don't delude yourself into thinking you've got the right values when you're in the dating pool, because that will have you confused, because you'll think you're doing nothing wrong and you just can't find the right guy. But it's not that you're doing nothing wrong and you can't find the right guy. It's because you're rewarding the wrong and then assuming you still want the right guy.
Yeah, getting your values right.
Getting your
look
at your behaviors. They'll tell you your values. I can say I'm really healthy, but I never go to the gym and I don't eat healthy. That means I'm not.